They mocked us. Mocked our restraint. Called us cowards in the same breath they signed peace treaties with blood still dripping from their claws. But what they didn't know, what they could never imagine, was that humanity doesn't growl. We don't hiss. We endure. We calculate. And when we strike, it's not a war. It's a reckoning. They called him a shadow in a suit. Riker Kane, Terran ambassador to the Galaxy Council, walked into the chamber without a weapon, without armor, without even raising his voice. But every time he sat in that hollowed-out ring of arrogance and neon-lit banners, entire empires felt nervous. They didn't know why. Just that something about the human stillness felt dangerous. The Draxari called it cowardice. "Why do you sit silent, Earthborn?" hissed Marshal Vector, flaring his gill frills in mockery. "Is the mammal tongue too soft for war talk?" Laughter erupted, some guttural, others electrical, some piped through direct mind links. Over 300 species roared in chorus. Kane said nothing. He merely looked up, adjusted his lapel, and blinked once. The laughter faded faster than it should have. The session continued as expected, threats, accusations, shifting alliances painted as peace offers. The Hellion corridor was a powder keg of wormholes and rare element-rich stars. And every major faction wanted it. The Council had spent 2 months pretending to negotiate its control. Kane knew better. So he sat. Took notes. Listened. Every insult, every joke, every deceit catalogued with quiet precision. It was Queen Mindsketh of the Zaruk swarm who tried last. "Perhaps the Earth delegate wishes to file a protest?" she chirped in high-pitched hive harmonics. "You may speak, little ape. Your silence is mistaken for submission." Kane stood. The chamber fell still. His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. "I was sent here not to win arguments," Kane said, "but to confirm suspicions." A ripple moved through the room. Even the Veltar nodes paused their data streams. Kane continued, folding his hands behind his back. "You asked why we stayed silent? Why we avoided conflict? Why we kept out of the Hellion dispute? It's simple. We believed in diplomacy. We believed in restraint. We believed you might value peace." He stepped forward, eyes locked on Vector. "You laughed at our restraint. Mocked our hesitation. Interpreted silence as fear. That was your first mistake." He turned slowly, voice steady. "Your second mistake was assuming we were unarmed." A hum began. Subtle. In the far corner of the chamber, a projection lit up uninvited. An AI override signal, origin unknown, flashed a single sentence across the center dome. "Protocol Vessel 0 is now active." Counselors scrambled. The Veltar sent bursts of countercode. The Zaruk flooded the channel with psychic noise. Nothing worked. The override stayed. Solid. Absolute. Kane took out a small black card and placed it on the platform. "Effective immediately, the Terran Accord is invoking severance. We are no longer participating in Council politics, treaties, or trade." Gasps. Outrage. The chamber lit up in waves of accusations. Kane raised his voice once. "We have withdrawn all ambassadors. Deactivated all Terran-linked navigation systems used in shared space. Closed all wormhole gates constructed with human tech. You'll find your fleets stranded." Queen Mindsketh screeched. "You would isolate yourselves? Foolish. You depend on Council travel." Kane smiled. "No. You depend on us. You just never noticed." More lights flickered on. Hollow screens across the chamber displayed real-time failure reports. Veltar dreadnoughts stalled in transit. Draxari battlecruisers trapped in FTL ghost lanes. Zaruk hive nodes losing connection with their queens. Panic spread in controlled bursts. Some tried to retreat. Kane didn't stop them. "We seeded kill switches in your systems over the last 20 years. Every tech upgrade, every trade deal, every diplomatic software patch. You downloaded your leash." A Veltar node burst into rapid signal, desperation in digital. Kane interrupted. "We won't launch a war. he said. We already won it. The Zaruk attempted a psionic spike. A wave of pressure surged through the mental layer of the chamber, standard intimidation. Kane barely flinched. Our minds are shielded. You'd know that if you hadn't used stolen neuromaps from our first delegation. Another mistake. Vector roared. You dare threaten us? The Council is unity. Kane's tone hardened. You confuse unity with stagnation. You think conquest is strength. But humanity? We define strength by what we don't destroy. The room darkened. Council systems collapsed under internal sabotage, by their own infrastructure. Kane stepped back, letting silence fill the chamber once more. We gave you 20 years of peace. And you spat on it. So now we're giving you consequence. He tapped his wrist. A final transmission began. Galaxy-wide. Every device, screen, or compoint received the same simple message. From this moment forward, Earth recognizes no authority but its own. Our silence was patience. Your mockery was permission. The reckoning has begun. Kane turned, walking away. No guards. No escort. Vector shouted after him, voice thick with fury. This is madness. We will retaliate. We will strike Earth itself. Kane paused at the threshold. Glanced over his shoulder. You can try. He walked out. Behind him, panic became policy. Factions turned on each other. Every empire tried to control the damage, but none could stop it. Earth didn't invade. It disengaged. And that was worse. Because Earth didn't bring war to the galaxy. It simply made the galaxy remember what war looked like, without their permission. The countdown began with no explanation. Just a number, 72 hours. Every council relay, every public screen across 7 quadrants, pulsed with the signal. No sound. No warning. Just the clock. On Sorrento's Prime, traffic control went silent. On the Veltar Cradle world, the orbital AI began rerouting military traffic without authorization. Draxery fleets receiving maintenance in council-aligned yards found their systems frozen mid-overhaul. Zaruk synapse cores began emitting random Earth language data strings they couldn't translate or suppress. No one could trace the source. On the council floor, panic took shape in the language of bureaucracy. Emergency sessions were called, subcommittees formed, accusations flew. Earth had disappeared. No diplomats. No envoys. Every wormhole entry registered as null. Gateways built with Terran stabilizers locked into entropy cycles. Even black market attempts to reverse engineer the systems failed. Humanity had cut its leash and welded the door shut behind them. Marshal Vector stormed from one chamber to the next, rallying Draxery support for military response. The Veltar issued strategic projections, full-scale economic collapse in less than 45 days if Earth-based trade didn't resume. Zaruk Queens signaled caution, sensing a trap deeper than simple tech sabotage. But fear doesn't listen. Pride does. Kane had said nothing since the message. Earth didn't follow up. Didn't offer terms. Didn't request dialogue. And that terrified the Council more than any declaration of war. By the 48-hour mark, half the Council's member species had triggered contingency plans. Military fleets moved into defensive patterns. Strategic assets were recalled. Propaganda campaigns tried to downplay the scale of the threat. Then came Day 2's message. Broadcast from an unregistered human signal station floating in the Lorne expanse. One sentence. You mocked what you didn't understand. We withdrew what you depended on. It wasn't a threat. It was a diagnosis. The Veltar attempted counter-hacking protocols to trace the source. Within minutes, their entire fleet command architecture collapsed. Their communications network broadcast its own defense codes galaxy-wide. Earth hadn't just planted malware. It had rebuilt the entire framework beneath their operating system. On the council floor, Node 553 disintegrated its own projection in a shriek of corrupted binary. Vector lost patience. Enough of this coward's trickery! Humans cower behind shadows. Let them face steel! The Draxery mobilized 4 fleets under his command. 39 dreadnoughts, multiple orbital artillery platforms, full battle groups. Their target, Sol. The Council registered protests, but none with weight. The Draxery war engine moved fast, faster than the diplomatic corps could protest. It didn't matter. They believed it was a show of strength that would draw Earth back to the table. A demonstration. Not a war. At hour 62, the first fleet vanished. Not destroyed. Not disabled. Simply, gone. Telemetry ended mid-jump. No wreckage. No final burst. Just static. An emergency summon to Kane's last known channel received a single reply. You were warned not to enter Sol space. You did it anyway. Don't pretend surprise. 2 hours later, the second Draxery fleet arrived at Saturn orbit. They never breached Mars. Long-range sensors detected something, irregular movement in the rings. By the time they adjusted targeting systems, kinetic projectiles the size of city blocks punched through 12 ships in 1 minute. No light, no beam, no plasma. Just brute force, gravity calculated and absolutely silent. One message followed. That was a warning shot. The next will aim for your command corps. Vector raged across the net. Called humanity dishonorable, cowards hiding behind drones and AI. He demanded face-to-face combat, righteous confrontation. Earth replied once. You wanted war. You didn't ask what kind we prepared for. The third fleet turned back. The fourth never left dock. Across Council worlds, fear spread. Not of invasion. Earth wasn't conquering. Earth wasn't demanding. Earth wasn't even speaking. They were withholding. And in that absence, power slipped. Routes failed. Economies collapsed. Strategic resources were cut off. Systems built on Earth's math, Earth's tech, Earth's maps, now turned hostile to every touch not Terran. Council factions tried to reactivate abandoned wormholes. They collapsed in unstable gravity rifts. Planets that once hosted 6 races now faced riots, food shortages, power failures. Pirates surged. Black markets tripled in strength overnight. A new symbol began circulating. A black insignia of Earth's orbit ringed in red. Do not provoke. It didn't come from Earth. It came from defectors. A group of minor races, long treated as pawns by the Council, initiated a rogue pact. The Tlarn, Indari, Sithrek. Species barely above colonization tier. They weren't warriors, but they had memory. They remembered who traded fairly. Who protected their embassies when Council guards stood down. Who provided medtech without demanding tribute. They remembered the humans. The trio initiated contact through deadnet channels. Asked for talks. Pledged cooperation. Not with the Council. With Earth. And Earth replied. 1 sentence. Then we begin again. The message didn't appear in the Council chamber. It appeared on every active screen in the galaxy. 3 minutes later, the countdown stopped. At 0. No explosion. No attack. Just silence. And then, open source release of Earth's wormhole stabilization tech. Military grade, stripped of the Council's restrictions. Bundled with it, code for permanent encryption protocols. A toolkit. Free. Available to all. But locked. The key? Each race had to ratify a new clause. A single line. No secrets. No first strikes. Total transparency. AI-governed diplomacy. The galaxy reeled. Earth hadn't pulled the trigger. They'd flipped the board. And left it open for those brave enough to start again without the lies. The Council was no longer in control. Its halls still existed, its titles still spoken, but the weight behind them had vanished. Systems once loyal were silent. Votes were cast but not followed. Orders issued but not obeyed. Somewhere in the wreckage of status, the old empire floated directionless, orbiting a star that no longer lit the galaxy. In the absence of response, Earth didn't gloat. They didn't send demands, ultimatums, or fleets. They sent data. Raw, unfiltered, permanent. First came the black records, treaties signed in bad faith, civilian massacres covered as resource reclamation, species sterilized in the name of genetic stability. Earth hadn't intercepted these files. The Council had handed them over willingly, decades ago, thinking humanity too primitive to decode the encryption. They were wrong. Then came the second wave, proof of manipulation. Economic sabotage against emerging powers. Deliberate technological suppression. Coordinated disinformation campaigns designed to keep planets in dependency. Every layer peeled back exposed more decay. What the Council called unity had been built on erosion. And still, no human appeared. No face to hate. No commander to target. Only truth, carried like radiation, slow, irreversible, fatal to lies. Amidst the fallout, small species began aligning publicly with Earth. The Tlarn were the first. Then the Indari, the Sithrek, the Jalai, the Arko. No weapons exchanged hands. No fleets were launched. Only one agreement was required: full transparency. Shared knowledge, open archives, permanent audit logs accessible to every citizen. Earth enforced it with code, not soldiers. If a partner lied, their data collapsed. If they deceived, their systems rewrote themselves into digital stone walls. No second chances. The galaxy laughed less with each passing day. Back on the Council floor, only 14 member platforms remained active. The rest were vacant. Some scorched from internal sabotage. Others simply powered down, disconnected by defectors unwilling to risk further exposure. Marshal Vector remained defiant, but the confidence was hollow now. His fleets had shrunk by half. Recruitment was down. Supply lines thin. The new recruits weren't soldiers. They were desperate. Not one of them had encountered Earth in combat. No one had. That was the new fear. He shouted into the chamber, hoping the walls still listened. Earth has made us paranoid cowards! Where is their navy? Where is their leader? We fight shadows, not warriors. Node 553's replacement, a lower-tier Veltar analyst unit named Synth 9, responded flatly. Perhaps that's because we are not fighting. We are being corrected. Vector bared his fangs, but even his generals turned their eyes away. The Council was no longer debating whether Earth had won. The question now was what came next. Elena Voss answered it. She hadn't spoken since the original Severance transmission. Her voice returned not as an address, but as a conversation. One sent live from an unregistered Terran signal that couldn't be blocked, decrypted, or traced. She sat at a table. Alone. No insignia. No guards. Just a cup of tea untouched. You built a galaxy of lies, and then feared what might happen if truth ever got loud. She sipped once, then looked directly into the feed. We were never afraid of you. We were afraid of becoming you. She laid out what Earth had seen. The patterns of exploitation. The engineered conflicts. The diplomatic theater designed to keep peace profitable, never permanent. We refused to play. You called that weakness. So we let you write your own obituary, one contract at a time. Then she leaned in, and her words sliced like plasma. But understand this. What we're doing now, this isn't revenge. It's repair. And repair hurts. Across the galaxy, human systems activated synchronously. Not weapons. Infrastructure. Power grids stabilized on fringe colonies. Food shipments arrived to famine-struck systems abandoned by the Council. Earth's AI distributed advanced medtech to species still suffering from Council-imposed population caps. Every act was public. Every credit traced. Every protocol logged. It was salvation with receipts. And yet, Earth offered no flag to swear to, no anthem to sing. Only one rule: everything must be visible. Every act recorded. Every decision accountable. Every lie fatal. They called it the Accord of Reckoning. Membership was not granted, it was earned. Provisional entry required complete data transparency, public logs, and open civic access. Council factions balked. They called it tyranny of truth. But people, across planets, moons, and stations, started choosing it anyway. Because when the cost of lies was collapse, truth became a survival instinct. Council leadership met in secret one last time. Some pushed for a military strike. Others wanted to negotiate. A few, quietly, with shame, considered joining Earth's accord. Vector demanded war. Synth 9 calculated a 99.7% probability of failure. The Zaruk delegate simply wept, its psionic aura stained with guilt that no one acknowledged. Then the chamber lights dimmed. Not from power failure. From override. The Earth relay activated again. But this time, it wasn't Elena. It was every voice Earth had recorded. Victims. Survivors. Testimonies. Screams. Names. 10 full minutes of raw history, unfiltered and irreversible. At the end, a final message appeared. You laughed at our restraint. You mocked our mercy. But mercy was the only thing keeping you safe. The feed ended. And the war, though never declared, was finally over. It ended not with a scream, but with silence. No fleets surged toward Earth. No final counterstrike came. The Council, for all its history, had nothing left to launch. Their weapons had been disabled, their networks unraveled, their secrets exposed. But that wasn't why they stopped. They stopped because the galaxy had turned its back on them. In the span of weeks, more than 100 species formally declared alignment with the Accord of Reckoning. Not under force. Not out of fear. But because they'd finally seen an alternative. A future where governance meant accountability, not performance. Where diplomacy meant protection, not positioning. And where silence was no longer mistaken for surrender, but recognized as the breath before action. Elena Voss returned once, unannounced, to the council chamber. The lights still worked. The seats still floated. The ancient insignia still pulsed overhead. But the grandeur had worn thin. The weight of the room no longer belonged to it. It belonged to her. She didn't wait for ceremony. You once asked why we refused to fight, she said, standing alone in the center ring. You assumed our patience meant fear. That we lacked stomach. That we lacked strength. Her eyes scanned the half-filled seats. Those who remained, not because they still believed in the council, but because they had nowhere else left to go. You never understood restraint. To you, it looked like passivity. Inaction. Weakness. But that's because you only ever valued power when it made noise. She held up a small black disc. A recording device. No threat. No weapon. Just truth. This is every lie spoken in this room. Every broken agreement. Every silenced voice. Every hidden cost. She placed it on the central podium and stepped back. We didn't need fleets. We didn't need battles. We needed only time. And while you ruled through spectacle, we prepared through silence. One of the remaining delegates, a minor trade species, raised its voice, shaky, but sincere. What now? What do we do? Elena didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, there wasn't a simple answer. The Accord wasn't a replacement empire. It had no throne. No unified language. No conquest plan. It didn't offer safety without scrutiny, or growth without sacrifice. What it offered was hard, often uncomfortable, but real. You rebuild, she said finally. Not from what you were. From what you chose not to be. The Veltar remnant offered data integration. The Zaruk remnants voted to dissolve their hive structure and create a council from individual minds. The Draxari war faction was formally disbanded by internal mutiny. Even Vector, defiant to the end, had vanished, his last transmission a single sentence. Perhaps they were right to fear silence. As for Earth, they didn't celebrate. There were no parades. No flags planted. No mission accomplished banners. The work had only just begun. Because cleaning up corruption is easy compared to rebuilding trust. Kane returned home with no fanfare. His job, as he saw it, had never been about winning. It was about proving that restraint wasn't weakness. That logic wasn't cowardice. That the absence of violence wasn't the absence of power, it was its most responsible form. He spent his days writing debriefs, not for the council, but for history. For the species that had never been given a voice. For the children born under regimes that traded their futures for temporary favor. For those who might one day forget that silence, when wielded with precision, can be the loudest weapon of all. Humanity didn't reshape the galaxy with fire. They reshaped it by withdrawing the oxygen that fed the fire in the first place. The Council's failure wasn't military. It was moral. And Earth made that visible. The last public address of the transition period came from a colony on the far edge of Terran space, a small mining world once taxed into poverty by the Council's tribute system. Now, it stood as one of the first worlds fully reintegrated under Accord protocols. Open records. Open borders. Zero tolerance for deception. A girl, no older than 12, stood in front of the broadcast node. She wasn't a politician. Not trained. She just wanted to speak. "My father used to say Earth didn't belong here," she began. "That we weren't strong enough. That we didn't have fleets, or claws, or wings. But when the ships stopped coming, and the power went out, and no one answered the distress signals, Earth showed up. No flags. Just food. Just water. Just help." She paused, shy but determined. "You don't need to be loud to matter. You just need to do the right thing when no one else will." The message echoed more than any weapon ever could. Because in the end, it wasn't Earth's force that undid the Council. It was Earth's refusal to become them. And in that refusal, they became something else entirely. A mirror. A reckoning. A reminder. Never laugh at the quiet ones. Not unless you're ready for the day they stop laughing back.